The house was quieter than usual, even for a Thursday evening. The kitchen lights dimmed low, barely cutting through the dusk seeping in from the windows. The smell of roasted chicken still lingered, but the plates sat half-eaten, steam long gone. Across the table, Dahlia scrolled through her phone, nodding once to something I couldn't see. The television murmured in the background, a late-night game show, I think. Neither of us looked at it. I reached for my glass of water, not because I was thirsty, but because the silence needed a gesture to keep from collapsing into something heavier. She didn't look up, just kept scrolling. 10 years ago, we used to argue about where to vacation. Now we just sit in silence. I chewed on a piece of overcooked carrot and tried to remember the last time she laughed at one of my jokes. Couldn't pin it. Maybe last Christmas? Or was that her sister's joke? Dahlia cleared her throat, still not meeting my eye, and I pretended to be interested in the napkin I was folding and unfolding. Our house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a terminal waiting room, polite, tired, and overly sanitized. There was a time I'd come home and she'd be waiting at the door. Now I beat her home, cook dinner, and get a half nod in return. Her eyes used to shine when I walked in. These days, they barely register the movement, and I kept telling myself this was just a phase. But tonight, it felt like an ending. Funny how memory creeps in when silence stretches too long. I thought back to the job in Denver, the one I turned down. Regional manager, decent pay, great schools for the kids. But Dahlia's parents were aging, and she couldn't bear to move too far. So we stayed. Then there was the bike. My Harley. Sold it when her dad needed heart surgery, and the insurance only covered half. I didn't blink. Just listed it the next morning. And yet, when she wanted to go back to school for her business degree, I handled everything. Breakfast, lunch boxes, sick days. Never once complained. And yet, no birthday cards. No thank you on Father's Day. No notes in my lunch like I used to leave in hers. Somewhere along the line, love turned into a job description. Love isn't loud. Sometimes it dies in whispers. She set her phone down with a sigh, as if the act itself was exhausting. Her voice was too casual, almost amused. You know Rachel's husband, the one who works at Brighton Capital, she said without looking at me. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. He just made VP last week. Nice raise, corner office, the whole deal. She paused, letting the air go stale between us. Maybe I should have married someone more ambitious, she said, with a soft chuckle like it was a harmless joke, but it wasn't. I didn't say anything. Just stared at my plate, letting her words echo in my skull like a fire alarm you can't shut off. My jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. I nodded again, not to her, but to myself, because that was the moment I stopped pretending. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come without raised voices. I remembered last fall. I came home early from work, and she didn't hear me in the hallway. She was on the phone with her sister. He's too soft, she said. He's never going to make it big. I told myself she didn't mean it. Maybe she was frustrated. Maybe I was imagining the disdain in her voice, but tonight confirmed it. It wasn't a slip. It was how she saw me. I looked at her now and wondered if I'd been living in someone else's story, supporting actress in a play where I thought I was the lead. We stood in front of a church 10 years ago, vowing forever. I think I'm the only one still holding on to those words. You can survive a loveless marriage, but not a disrespectful one. She finally looked at me, a rare thing these days. Her eyes studied me, not with affection but curiosity, like she was assessing a stranger. Do you ever think we settled too soon? She asked gently, like it was just a passing thought. I didn't answer. I stood up, pushed my chair back without a word, and walked toward the door. Her voice called after me, once, unsure, but I didn't turn around. The front door creaked open, and the cold Kentucky air hit my face like a slap. It felt good. The morning crept in without ceremony. No alarm, no birdsong. Just the dull hum of the fridge and the scratch of branches tapping against the window. I blinked up at the ceiling, and for a moment, I thought she might still be there beside me, but the space was cold, her side untouched. I found the note on the fridge. Gone to the gym. Be back later. 4 words, scrawled in a hurry like she was checking out of a motel room after a one-night stand. 2 coffee cups sat on the counter, both cold, one still full. Mine, of course. I stood there in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, reading the note again, not because it said much, but because it didn't. That blank space around her words screamed louder than anything we'd ever yelled. I woke up to silence, and somehow it was louder than any fight we'd ever had. There used to be music in this house, laughter, even when we disagreed. Now it's all cautious movements and unspoken grievances. I used to believe we were just tired, that life wore people down. But it wasn't just exhaustion, it was erosion. Piece by piece, whatever we had crumbled, and I was only just beginning to see the rubble. I wandered into the living room, let myself sink into the recliner. The same spot I used to hold my daughter when she was teething. She's 9 now, and I'm not sure she even remembers. The silence didn't just come overnight. It crept in, covered everything like dust on forgotten shelves. 2 years ago, Dahlia invited me to her company's holiday party. I thought it was a gesture, a reconnection. Instead, I was wallpaper, there, but invisible. Her colleagues were all in suits and cocktail dresses, trading stories about investments and IPOs. One guy, tall, square-jawed, asked if I was between jobs. I told him I worked full-time in logistics. He nodded politely, then moved on like I'd confessed I collected stamps. Dahlia didn't correct him, didn't say a word. She just smiled and changed the subject. I stood there with my drink, surrounded by people who didn't care if I drowned in it. Sometimes people let others disrespect you just to make themselves look bigger. I didn't bring it up afterward. I didn't want to seem insecure. But that night dug a trench inside me. A quiet shame I didn't know what to do with. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Turns out, I wasn't being sensitive enough. Later that morning, I decided to clean out the garage. It was overdue anyway, boxes stacked high, tools I hadn't used in years. As I dug through a drawer of random cords and chargers, I found her old phone, the one she upgraded from last spring. It still turned on. I wasn't snooping. Not at first, but curiosity's a dangerous thing when the truth has been whispering in your ear for months. There were audio files, voice memos, saved under random names like grocery list and call reminder. One caught my eye. The timestamp said February 12th, around the time we'd had a small fight. Nothing major, just her accusing me of being complacent. I pressed play. It was her voice, shaky but clear, talking to her sister. "He's not a bad man," she said. "He's just not the man I wanted to build an empire with." I didn't move, didn't blink, just listened. Then I played it again and again. That's when it hit me. I hadn't been imagining things. This wasn't a rough patch. It was a reckoning. I didn't smash the phone. Didn't scream. I just sat there on the concrete floor, staring at the shelves, the paint cans, the old bike helmets, listening to that one sentence, over and over, like an autopsy report for a marriage. He's just not the man I wanted to build an empire with, not angry, not cruel, just disappointed. It was almost worse. I got up slowly and connected the phone to my laptop, saved the audio. Then I started going through our records, receipts, old texts, emails, tax filings, not with a plan, not for revenge, for clarity. For the first time in years, I felt the fog lifting. It's funny how someone can make you feel invisible for so long. You start seeing everything. I wasn't ready to walk away, but I wasn't going to stay blind either. Hours passed. Light shifted in the garage, slanting in through the high windows. I stood in front of the mirror mounted above the workbench, the same one I used to check before heading out to job interviews or family cookouts. I held the phone in my hand like it might give me answers, looked at myself, really looked. "So, who do you become when love no longer softens you?" I asked aloud, though no one was there to hear. The phone buzzed in my palm. A new message. "Dahlia, we need to talk later tonight." I peeled potatoes in the kitchen, keeping my back to the door. The scent of garlic and olive oil filled the room, quiet, familiar. I figured she would walk in any minute, linen blouse wrinkled, hair damp from a shower, but time stretched. The ticking clock became a drum in my ears. When Dahlia finally slipped into the room, she looked different, hair pinned up, a sharper contour to her cheeks, a presence I no longer recognized. She paused at the threshold and studied me as though she were seeing someone new. I placed 2 plates on the table, tried to offer a small smile. She nodded, murmured thanks, and sat without a word. Her silence tasted heavy. I slid into my chair, folded my hands, and took a breath. Still gentle, still quiet, I asked, "Is there someone else?" The words felt impossibly delicate against what had grown between us. Her eyes flickered. She didn't answer outright. She said instead, "You already know the answer, don't you?" The room overturned in that line, and everything we'd built felt thinner, like a veneer cracking under pressure. Later, she stepped into the backyard. The night air was cool. Crickets made a gentle hum. I slipped out through the sliding glass door, footsteps silent against the deck boards. She was at the far end of the yard, phone pressed to her ear, back turned. I flattened myself against the siding, cracked the window frame, raised my phone's recorder. Her voice floated, laughter, breathy, nervous. "Not yet," she said to someone. "He's still clueless." I saw her lips curve. "I just need to make him be the one to leave. That way I keep everything clean." That line struck me like a verdict. My stomach turned. Betrayal isn't made of fists. It's made of decisions behind closed doors. When the one you trusted treats you like a draft to be erased. I held my phone steady, recording the betrayal in real time. I didn't lash out. I stayed crouched, listening. I replayed the line in my head, my name tangled in a plan I didn't know existed. Later that night, we climbed into the same bed, warmth between us but only skin touching. Dahlia kissed my forehead before sleep took her. Her head slumped to my shoulder, but she felt like a phantom. I lay awake, cataloging every shift of breath she made, every exhale, every quiet murmur. I replayed the voice memos in my mind. When someone lies to your face knowing you know the truth, that's not love, that's warfare. My resolve tightened. I pulled out my laptop, opened a new document, drafted an email, but I stopped short. I didn't press send, not yet. There was a time to wait, a time to move. In the half-dark, I recalled the nights she cried on me after a failed pitch, her tears mixing with mine. I rubbed her back till she slept. I promised her the world. And now she barely looks at me. People don't change. They just finally show you who they really are. In the dimness, I felt it. The moment I shifted, I was no longer pleading to be seen. I was preparing to expose what was hidden. I walked into the garage, bootsteps echoing. The recording and files followed me like sacred tools. I plugged the phone into the charging port, opened cloud storage, named the folder. For the day it matters. I whispered to myself, "You want me to walk away clean? Fine, but not the way you think." Sunday crept in without ceremony. I was up before the sun made its way through the blinds. The silence felt sharper now, like the walls had begun to listen. I brewed a pot of coffee, 2 mugs by habit, and brought one to the home office where Dahlia and I once shared long nights building spreadsheets and business plans. Back when the dream still felt mutual, the office was unchanged. Same pine desk, same corkboard pinned with old motivational quotes. But something was different. The file cabinet we both used had a new lock. Small, chrome, deliberate. I tried our shared key. No click. I stood there longer than I needed to, not because I expected the lock to change its mind, but because I realized something else had. She used to dream out loud in this room. About markets, about mergers. She said things like, "We'll own our time." I used to believe her. Now she was locking me out of the very thing I helped build. I stepped back, coffee untouched, and left the room behind. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Dahlia's study was down the hall. She wasn't home. The door was cracked open. I slipped inside, heart steady, but mind braced. Her space looked more like a command center than a study. Papers everywhere, tax returns, investment forms, spreadsheets that didn't include my name. I scanned the surfaces until something caught my eye. A leather-bound ledger, 2 columns, neatly ruled. On the left, our assets. On the right, other investments. It read like a confession. Line after line of funds moved, some out of our joint account, others through aliases I'd never heard before. Marketing fund, Brexon Vale. Proxy transfer, Laura Holdings. Margins scribbled in her handwriting. Move funds before he notices. I took out my phone and started snapping photos. I didn't flinch, just turned page after page, recording the evidence of the world I never realized I was financing. Then I saw it. A document half tucked into a file folder. I pulled it out. Transfer authorization at $150,000 moved from our shared account. The memo line, for growth strategy. The recipient, an LLC tied to Veil. Shell name, clean, undeniable. I read the paper again. My name was on it as the co-holder of the account, and she signed it under the umbrella of plausible business development. Is it growth when they rob you under your own name? The front door clicked open. I barely had time to set the document down when Dahlia walked in. She froze the second she saw the ledger in my hands. Her voice cracked through the room. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't move, looking at what I apparently co-own. Or maybe don't. She stormed over. "Give me your phone, now." I raised it, held it between us. "No." Her eyes sharpened. "Stay out of my finances, or I'll show everyone who you really are. You were never the visionary. I built this." I looked at her, really looked at her. Calm, cold. "You're not the only one who kept ledgers, Dahlia." Her face darkened. She turned on her heel and left the room without another word. I reached over and locked the study door behind her. It wasn't about keeping her out. It was about reclaiming a space that was never meant to be mine alone. I sat down at her desk, opened my laptop, and started an encrypted email to my lawyer. Subject, asset review. Message, we need full financial disclosure, immediately. Before I could press send, my phone vibrated, a text from her. "You really will regret this." I stared at the screen. No, I'd regret staying blind longer. Monday came with its usual noise, alarms, traffic, elevator doors, but I moved through it quieter than I used to. My small design firm downtown felt the same. The creak of the front door, the scent of toner, the low hum of the break room fridge. No one said it, but they noticed. I wasn't the same guy who cracked jokes at 9 a.m. or stayed late editing layouts. That version of me stayed in the wreckage. What walked through the door today was someone else. Focused, stripped down, clear. Jenna poked her head over my cubicle. "We're thinking Thai for lunch. You in?" I glanced at my screen, already halfway through 3 proposals. "Can't. Got a few things I need to handle." She nodded, slow. "You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I said, just recalibrating. At noon, instead of grabbing a takeout box and sitting in the break room like usual, I walked to the park 3 blocks down. The air was cool. I found a bench near a tree with leaves starting to turn. I pulled out a small notebook from my bag and wrote, not paragraphs, bullet points, thoughts, actions, risks, a strategy. I wasn't journaling pain. I was designing a response. If I could show up for everyone else while falling apart, I could show up for myself now, even when I was holding the pieces. Midway through the list, my grandmother's voice came back to me, quiet, unshakable. She used to say, "You don't owe anyone your silence when it starts to cost your soul." She was the only one who ever really understood how I move. Slow, steady, deliberate, not weak, just quiet. Back at the office, I opened my phone and created a folder. Exit plan. I filled it with screenshots of bank transactions, backup copies of emails, scans of personal IDs, photos of documents. I stored passwords, insurance numbers, reminders of meetings I needed to schedule. I sent the whole thing to my encrypted email account. Off-site storage for peace of mind. Then I went to our HR portal and updated my emergency contact, removed Dahlia's name, added my brother's. Simple, small, but enough. Power isn't always in leaving. Sometimes it's in showing you're prepared to. When 5 o'clock rolled around, I packed my laptop bag and walked to the parking garage. It had that echoing quiet of a Monday evening winding down. I reached the car, dropped into the driver's seat, and the phone lit up before I touched the ignition. A number I didn't recognize. One preview line. Tell him the truth before I do. Gee. I didn't move. The second message came with a photo. Dahlia and another man, Grant, sitting side by side in a booth, drinks in hand, laughing like high schoolers. Timestamp, 2 nights ago. It wasn't the affair that broke me. It was the arrogance, the assumption I'd stay blind, that I wouldn't know how to check metadata or trace a transfer or feel the shift in a room and know what it meant. I didn't flinch. I forwarded the text and photo to my lawyer with one line. Proof of bad faith. I drove home steady. No blasting music, no dramatic phone calls, just tires on pavement, the hum of the engine, and silence I didn't fear anymore. When I walked into the house, I didn't slam doors. I didn't call her name. I didn't look for a fight. Dahlia was in the kitchen, pouring hot water into her favorite ceramic mug like it was any other evening. She looked up and smiled like we were still playing the same game. I sat down at the table, placed my bag on the floor beside me, and waited until she turned around. "We need to revisit our prenup clause," I said. She gave a light, amused laugh, half snort, half disbelief. "You're serious?" I reached into my bag and placed the printed photo face down on the table. Just the photo. No words. The air in the room dipped by 10 degrees. She didn't touch the paper, just stared, then looked at me. It wasn't a threat. It was an announcement, the line I wouldn't let her cross again. She leaned in, voice lowered. "What exactly do you want from me?" I looked her dead in the eye. "The truth, all of it, or we stop pretending there's a we to save." Tuesday evening. House felt like a museum, quiet, staged, and echoing with truths no one wanted to speak. I sat on the couch, laptop open, papers scattered across the coffee table like the remains of a life I thought I understood. Documents I'd taken photos of last week. Shell corporations, weird ledger anomalies, wire transfers with strange memo lines, all pointing toward a machine that had kept spinning with me removed from the gears, but I wasn't spinning anymore. I was steering. The wine in my hand was older than our marriage. I never liked red, but tonight I let it burn slow down my throat, the bitterness fitting the silence. I wasn't drinking to forget. I was drinking to remember clearly. Dahlia was out again. Some meeting she didn't care to explain. Fine. I liked the house better without her in it lately. A folder sat open on the desktop. I named it Exposed Truth. No passwords. No hiding. If she looked, she'd see it. I kind of wanted her to. I used to dread silence. Now silence is my weapon. It hit me again. That gala 2 months back. Big launch, big lights. They handed out these books to the guests like candy. Glossy hardcover things titled Dahlia Dorn, Legacy Vision. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was tired, background noise at her side. But something about that night had started the itch. I remembered where I stashed the copy. Guest lounge, bottom shelf, right next to the old travel guides we never used. I flipped it open on the coffee table and started turning pages. She looked perfect in every photo, polished, poised. But as I read, the real story started falling apart. Every milestone, hers. Projects we built together, framed as solo triumphs. Images I took. I recognized the lighting, even the way she stood. No credit, no mention of me. It was like I never existed. And in one photo caption, someone had scribbled something in pen, underlined twice, "I built this without him." I stared at that line a long time. Then I started snapping photos of every omission, not out of spite, out of necessity. If I'd been erased in the book, I sure as hell wouldn't be erased in court. I closed it slowly, the weight of paper thicker than its pages. Back upstairs, I pulled out an old hard drive, labeled Joint Ventures. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside, folder after folder of startup plans, pitch decks, conference photos, our early grind. We were in those photos, arm in arm, faces younger, tired but hopeful. Those days felt real, honest. But then, buried deeper, I found something else. A file labeled Dahlia Business Plan V2, remove him. Modified just 2 weeks ago. Long before that phone call I overheard, the betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been drafted. I sat back in my chair, screen light flickering. She once said to me, "I need someone who pushes harder, who dreams bigger." I didn't think she meant alone. I didn't think she meant without you. Later we had dinner. Dahlia cooked, something with salmon and quinoa. She didn't look at me much, just talk numbers like we were strangers balancing a spreadsheet. Then she said it. "We should probably talk finances soon." I didn't speak right away. I just reached behind me, grabbed the gala book and slid it next to her plate. Then I added a stack of printouts, those ledgers, transaction trails, just gently laid them out one after another. Calm, she didn't touch them, but I saw her jaw tense. "You're making this personal," she said after a long pause. I looked her straight in the eye. "You already did. You made everything I did personal, by erasing me." She didn't deny it, just stared. I left the book open on the table and walked to the foyer. That silence, it said more than I ever could. Later that night, back in my study, I was reviewing slides when my phone pinged. New message, no name, just a file titled Legacy Alt. I opened it. First slide, a photo of Dahlia and me at the launch of the company. Big smiles. Underneath, in clean type, co-founders, 2014. Second slide, a memo header. Remove him, quietly. My stomach dropped. There it was, both stories, side by side. The one we told the world, and the one she wrote in secret. That night, I knew I wasn't fighting with her. I was fighting to reclaim myself. Wednesday night, I could smell the setup before I stepped into the dining room. The table was dressed like a magazine spread. Fresh flowers, curated silverware, napkins folded too perfectly. Dahlia stood near the kitchen, glass of wine in hand, laughter too deliberate. Loretta, her mother, was already seated, wearing pearls, posture sharp like she was preparing for a speech. A few mutual friends had arrived early, some I hadn't seen in months. One used to call me the reason she stayed grounded. Tonight, he barely looked my way. I scanned the seating arrangement, Dahlia dead center, Loretta on her right. I was at the far end, across from the door, like a guest in my own life. The music playing was soft jazz, Dahlia's favorite, and the playlist I made for her birthday 5 years ago. She'd repurposed it, just like everything else. Drinks flowed, toasts started. Dahlia raised her glass. To partners, she said, smiling wide. To those who know how to support ambition. Everyone lifted their glasses. I did too, quietly, and thought, every dinner has a battlefield. This one had mine seated at the wrong table. The meal was a parade of polite jabs. A guest leaned toward me with a rehearsed smile. I hear Dahlia's company is exploding. Must be nice having a strong spouse behind the curtain. Before I could respond, Dahlia chimed in, cheerful as ever. Oh, he has his full-time job. I run the business. The comment landed like a slap. Casual, calculated. Even my mother stiffened. She cleared her throat. That practiced gesture of redirecting without confrontation. But the damage was done. I wasn't invisible. I was decorative. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe how open the performance had become. Dessert came. Dahlia's favorite again. Not mine. A slice of her mother's lemon tart, served like tradition. Loretta tapped her glass. She didn't stand. Didn't need to. I've always supported this marriage, she said, voice clear and cutting. But I never saw Colvin as my daughter's equal. Silence. Heavy and immediate. He's done well for himself. But men, she added, pausing for emphasis, men are not built for following behind. Sometimes they need to lead or step aside. I didn't flinch, just stared at her, nodding once. Like I was filing her words away in a mental drawer labeled evidence. Inside, my chest felt tight. Not from the betrayal. That part wasn't new. It was the way she made it sound so noble. Like stepping on me with some kind of moral clarity. She never accepted me. She only accepted the idea of me she could control. Guests pretended to check their phones. One murmured something about needing to leave early. The war wasn't loud, but it was in every pause, every glance, every fork placed a little too neatly. When the last car pulled away, Dahlia found me in the kitchen, arms crossed like a teenager caught skipping class. She didn't mean it that way, she offered. I tilted my head. Sure she did. And now we'll use it. She blinked. Use it how? Tomorrow, I said calmly. I want a full accounting of all our finances. Every account, every transaction. No excuses. She tried to speak, then stopped. Her jaw tightened, and she nodded. I walked past her into my study, opened the folder on my desk, exposed truth, started drafting. Not a manifesto. Just clarity. Just facts. No more reaction, just preparation. A few minutes later, my phone lit up. New number, no name. Message, I have receipts that prove she told Vale he will take over. There was an audio attachment. I plugged in my headphones. Press play. Her voice. Dahlia, clear as a bell. Let him fail so I can build without him draining me. I didn't breathe for a moment. That wasn't business. That was the real her. The ballroom lights glowed before I stepped in. Hosts, guests, media flashes. I passed under those arcs of illumination like a shadow moving through daylight. Dahlia stood on the stage, her smile calibrated, applause ready. I entered quietly, dressed sharply, carrying two things: a USB drive and a bundle of printed documents I'd double-checked 3 times. My notebook lay closed in my jacket pocket. I watched her face, watched the crowd. I whispered under my breath, tonight isn't about hiding in shadows. It's time someone turned on the spotlight. The room's hum swallowed me, but I stayed present. I slid into my seat, shoulders squared, heart steady. She began speaking, triumphant tone, stories of overcoming, of shared vision, of partnership. The mic carried her confidence. Applause warmed her, fed her. The crowd leaned in. I watched her own reflection in the polished marble behind her, poised, commanding, revered. That was the mask she wore for them. Tonight that mask would crack. At the perfect moment, the screens behind her flickered. Her voice stuttered. The light dimmed. Confusion rippled across faces. Then the display cut out entirely. The speakers went silent. Gasps climbed. A video loop began. Older footage played backward. On the screen, Dahlia's voice. Make sure he never speaks at this event. The humiliation was surgical. The phrase echoed. She froze mid-sentence, lips parted, jaw clenched. Cameras swung, flashbulbs popped, all eyes turned toward me. My pulse hammered. The room shifted on its axis. I rose, walked toward the lectern. The envelope felt weighty in my hand. I placed it there carefully, sealed. A hush fell. I reached for the mic. Finance matters. Integrity matters. We've been in this together, until tonight. I held the envelope out. She opened it. Inside, a check for $500,000 in my name, stamped, last payment you'll ever cash in my name. The audience murmured, detective eyes scanning. Her face slackened, a tremble in her eyes. She opened her mouth, no words formed. Then I nodded to the projection team. The screens behind me lit again. Slide 1. The original founding contract from 2014. My name, her name, signatures. Next slide. What she filed later, my name redacted, wiped. The room gasped. I said, voice firm, you erased my role, but you can't erase the truth. This is the original. This is your deception. She tried to interrupt. I held the mic. Her composure tremored. The documents, the book, the phone, they all weighed in. The contrast showed. The truth burst through the lie. Cameras roared, voices rose. I watched her lips part, then shut again. She backed away. I stepped forward, owning the silence that followed. My heart pounded, but my voice remained calm. Underneath it all, I felt vindication. They couldn't unsee now. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Her body stiffened. She nodded once. I cleared my throat. I give you one last chance to explain, or I let this room decide for both of us. The hush tightened further. The mask broke. The lake sat still that afternoon, like it had been holding its breath for a month. The trees had turned, burnt orange, soft gold, that kind of color you only get in October. I sat on the porch of the old cabin, listening to the birds move overhead. Nothing buzzed, no phones, no interviews, no lawyers, just wind. That month passed quietly. After the gala, everything shifted. Dahlia released a statement. Brief, no flair, accepting responsibility for the altered contracts. Said she'd made regrettable choices. No spin, just facts. For once, legal matters settled outside of court. No headlines, just clean signatures and silence. I'd started walking in the mornings again. Real walks, not pacing. I journaled more, not out of habit, but as a release. Wrote until the pen stopped on its own. I'd gotten letters, people I didn't even know. One woman wrote, "You reminded me I still get to say no." Another from a young entrepreneur. "You're proof quiet men don't have to be forgotten." And sitting out there, with the wind cutting through the branches and the lake lapping like it was thinking, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper, but it echoes longer. Late afternoon, a knock came at the door. I opened it expecting wind or a lost hiker. It was Brandon, Dahlia's younger brother. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked older and heavier in the shoulders, not the waist. He didn't ask to come in, just held out a manila envelope, said no return address, just figured it ought to reach you. I nodded, took it, didn't open it right away. We sat on the porch for a while, not much talk, just silence, but the kind that feels like acknowledgement, not avoidance. Eventually I peeled the envelope open. Inside was a photo, old one. Me and Dahlia sitting on lawn chairs outside our first office, paint still wet on the logo sign. We looked tired, happy, scribbled on the back in her handwriting. I'm sorry, you were always the better half of this story. I didn't know what to feel. My chest tightened. It wasn't vindication, wasn't regret either. Just something in between. Brandon stood to leave. Said he was moving out west. Starting over. Before he left, he looked me square in the face and said, "You deserve better, man." She knew it. We all did. We just didn't say it out loud. Then he was gone. That night, I pulled out the journals again, flipped through pages where I doubted every step I took, where I thought I was the weak link, the shadow. Then I turned to a blank page and wrote, "Success isn't what they see. It's what you carry quietly, with dignity." A few days later, I started mentoring, small group, local girls interested in coding, entrepreneurship, nothing fancy, no cameras. Just truth and tools, the kind of help I wish someone had offered me at 23. I shared something Maya Angelou once said, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." That line stayed with me even when the girls left. Weeks passed, the air got colder. News broke quietly. Dahlia had stepped down as CEO. No fanfare, no new venture lined up. She released one sentence, "It's time for me to listen instead of speak." I didn't laugh, I didn't sneer, just stared out the window for a while. One afternoon, I drove past the building we once built together, new banner on the front, "Empowerment through Truth." I parked across the street, engine running, watched young people walk in full of energy, unaware of the ghost the walls held. And I thought to myself, she needed to chase power. I found mine by letting it go. Back at the cabin, I sat by the lake again. One of the girls I mentored had written me a letter, just a few lines. The last one read, "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." I smiled, not out of pride, out of peace,